Perception is not just about how we see others, but also how we see ourselves in relation to them. When you step away, the person who remains behind has the opportunity to reflect not only on you, but on themselves. They begin to question how their own actions and behaviors contributed to the situation and how they have shaped the relationship. They might start to realize things about themselves that they hadn't noticed while you were constantly there to interact with them. This self-reflection, often prompted by your absence, can be a powerful tool for personal growth. It allows them to see the situation more clearly, to see you more clearly, and to see themselves more clearly. Walking away doesn't just affect how the other person views the relationship or you, it also triggers a shift in their perception of themselves. The space you create allows for a more thoughtful and deeper reflection on all aspects of the relationship and the dynamics involved. The absence creates an opportunity for new understanding, new realizations, and a deeper connection, whether that leads to reconciliation or simply a more honest and mature approach to the relationship moving forward. The key is that walking away challenges the perceptions that have been built up over time and allows for a more authentic, less clouded view of the situation. When you walk away, the space you create doesn't just affect the other person, it offers an opportunity for personal growth, not just for them, but for both parties involved. This distance is often seen as something negative, something that signals an end or failure, but in reality, it can serve as a powerful catalyst for self-discovery and transformation. The emotional void left behind forces a person to confront themselves in ways they might not have been able to while constantly surrounded by the dynamics of the relationship. It's in this space, away from the constant influence of the other person, that self-reflection and growth can occur. When you're always close to someone, especially in emotionally charged relationships, it's easy to become wrapped up in the immediate circumstances in the heat of the moment. Emotions can be overwhelming and decisions can be made impulsively, often driven by fear or a need for reassurance. Walking away, however, changes the context entirely. Without the constant presence of the other person, the mind is forced to step back and view the situation from a distance, free from the emotional intensity that often clouds judgment. This space allows both individuals the chance to process their feelings more clearly, allowing for an understanding of their true needs and desires without external pressure. In many cases, walking away provides the opportunity to focus on oneself for the first time in a long while. People often lose sight of their own goals, aspirations, or personal values when they become too involved in someone else's life. Being in close proximity to someone can sometimes blur the lines of individuality, and over time, it can lead to a sense of losing oneself within the relationship. But when you step back, you create the space needed to rediscover your own identity, to reconnect with your personal dreams, and to recognize your own worth. It's a reminder that you are not defined by the relationship, but by your own values, passions, and aspirations. This distance also enables both individuals to reassess their own behaviors and patterns within the relationship. Without the constant emotional interaction, there's more room to reflect on what worked, what didn't, and why things unfolded the way they did. People are often quick to blame others for the difficulties in a relationship, but walking away forces them to look inward, to examine their own actions and responses. It brings to light patterns they might have been blind to before, like unhealthy reactions, poor communication habits, or even subconscious expectations. This realization can be eye-opening, allowing for the kind of introspection that leads to meaningful personal growth. When the emotional fog is lifted, it becomes clear that growth comes from recognizing one's role in the dynamic and making the choice to improve. Walking away doesn't always mean the relationship is over or that personal growth will be stunted. In fact, it often leads to a stronger, more grounded sense of self. When individuals are able to reflect and make changes within themselves, they often find new strength and confidence. They come to realize that growth comes from within, and it is through the process of walking away and gaining distance that they have the opportunity to grow in ways they never anticipated. Sometimes it takes stepping away from someone to truly understand who you are and what you want from life. Additionally, space often allows for healthier communication should both parties decide to come back together. The emotional distance offers a chance to collect thoughts and feelings that might have been too raw or unspoken before. With time apart, both individuals have the opportunity to process their emotions, understand their needs, and come back to the table with a clearer perspective. When you walk away, it gives both people the space to grow individually, but it also opens the possibility for healthier, more honest communication when they do come together again. In relationships, we sometimes fail to recognize that growth is not a linear process. Walking away might feel like a break, but it's actually an essential part of the emotional journey. It offers the chance to build a stronger foundation, one that is rooted in self-awareness, maturity, and a deeper understanding of one's own needs and desires. By stepping away, you're not just creating distance from the other person, you're also making room for personal development, for self-discovery, and for the kind of growth that can lead to healthier, more fulfilling relationships in the future. Ultimately, the space created when you walk away becomes a powerful tool for growth. It is within this space that both individuals can reflect, recalibrate, and rebuild. Growth often happens when we're not looking for it, and the act of walking away can set the stage for that transformation to take place. What seemed like a difficult or painful moment can turn out to be a vital turning point on the path to self-improvement. It's not just about leaving, it's about giving both individuals the opportunity to evolve into the best versions of themselves. When you walk away, silence fills the space, and in that silence, something profound happens. Often, in the chaos of ongoing communication, whether through words or actions, people fail to recognize how loud their emotions and the situation itself can be. The noise of daily interactions, the constant exchanges, the unspoken pressures, these can cloud judgment and obscure the deeper truths that need to be recognized. But when you step away and leave silence in your wake, you create an environment where the mind is forced to slow down and reflect. Silence, in this case, is not just an absence of sound, but a presence of space, a space that allows for deeper contemplation, for the uncovering of truths, and for emotional clarity. In relationships, we often mistake communication for progress, believing that talking things through is the only way to resolve issues or understand each other. But sometimes too much communication, especially in emotionally charged situations, can cloud the truth and lead to misunderstandings. People might find themselves saying things they don't truly mean or responding out of hurt rather than reason. The presence of constant dialogue doesn't always lead to resolution. It can simply escalate the emotional tension. But silence does the opposite. When you walk away and allow for a moment of stillness, it grants everyone involved a chance to pause and reflect without the immediate pressure to respond or react. It's a chance for the emotions to settle, for the mind to regain its composure, and for the heart to process the feelings in a more deliberate way. In the absence of constant communication, the mind is freed from the need to react immediately. It has time to sift through the emotions that are stirred up and to evaluate them without the need for immediate validation or explanation. This is crucial for emotional clarity. The rawness of an emotional reaction, which often drives impulsive decisions or heated words, can be tempered when there is silence. It allows both parties to step out of the moment, to breathe, and to view the situation from a more objective perspective. The silence forces them to face their own emotions and their role in the situation, rather than being caught up in the back and forth that can sometimes divert attention away from what truly matters. When you leave space for silence, it also allows for introspection. The person who is left behind may initially feel disoriented or unsure, but in that disorientation there is an opportunity to dig deeper. Without the constant noise, they are able to reflect on their own feelings, to recognize what they may have been avoiding or suppressing. In silence, the truth can emerge. This is often the moment when someone realizes their own mistakes, the areas where they need to grow, or the things they've taken for granted. Silence makes room for this kind of introspection, and it often leads to greater emotional awareness. When the external world is quieted, it gives the inner world the chance to speak, and it can bring clarity to feelings that were previously muddled by noise. The emotional distance created by walking away also invites a shift in how the situation is perceived. It forces the mind to process things without the distraction of constant verbal exchange. When both parties are engaged in ongoing conversation, emotions can become cyclical, bouncing back and forth and fueling each other. But silence interrupts that cycle. It provides the opportunity to break the emotional loop and allows both individuals to think about their needs, their desires, and the situation at hand from a place of calm rather than a place of reaction. This is often when true understanding is born, when people come to realize what is truly at stake, and when the clarity to make better choices emerges. Silence is not about avoidance, and it's not about shutting down communication permanently. Rather, it's about creating a space where communication can take place from a place of intention and understanding, rather than from a place of emotional turmoil. When the silence has done its work, when both individuals have had the chance to reflect and process their feelings, it paves the way for more thoughtful, deliberate conversations. The mind has had time to digest, the heart has had time to heal, and the space has allowed both individuals to approach the situation with greater emotional maturity. In the end, the silence that follows walking away is not an absence, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for reflection, for personal growth, and for emotional clarity. The mind can step away from the noise, sort through the emotions, and come to a more balanced understanding. Sometimes it's in this quiet space that the answers we've been seeking are found, and it's in this stillness that true transformation can occur. Emotions are rarely static, they shift, change, and evolve with time. When you walk away, whether from a situation or a relationship, The emotions that were once clear or fixed begin to transform in ways that you might not have anticipated. The act of stepping away creates space for emotions to breathe, to grow, or even to fade. This dynamic nature of feelings is a crucial aspect of why walking away can have such a powerful impact. When you're constantly present in a relationship or situation, emotions can become so ingrained that they seem unchangeable. But when you create distance, emotions are given the opportunity to evolve, to be reassessed, and to be understood in new ways. Initially, walking away can cause a surge of emotion. The absence of the other person or the change in the environment can evoke feelings of sadness, anger, or confusion. These emotions are natural responses to the shift that has occurred, but over time, those emotions can begin to settle and transform. The initial emotional intensity often gives way to a deeper understanding of what was truly at play beneath the surface. The immediate reaction, whether it's frustration, grief, or relief, can fade as the mind starts to process what happened and why. The absence allows for a reevaluation of those feelings, where once hot emotions cool and shift into something more nuanced and reflective. What was once perceived as a permanent feeling can suddenly seem temporary. The intensity of emotions often fades when there is time and space between the incident and the person. What may have seemed unbearable or insurmountable in the heat of the moment can, in hindsight, become something that's easier to cope with. Walking away creates a buffer where the immediate emotional reactions no longer hold sway, allowing the person left behind to gain perspective. The passage of time allows for the rawness of emotion to be tempered with understanding and clarity, creating the potential for emotional healing. It's also important to recognize that walking away doesn't just allow emotions to transform, it can also allow them to mature. In relationships, people often act out of impulse or emotional reaction, driven by the immediate circumstances rather than a deep understanding of the bigger picture. But when there's distance, it gives both parties the space to reconsider their responses, to reflect on their behavior, and to grow emotionally. The space between interactions lets people process their emotions more thoroughly. The result is often a more mature and thoughtful approach to handling those emotions when they arise again. Instead of reacting from a place of hurt or frustration, both individuals may return with greater self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Walking away also creates room for the realization that emotions are fluid and subjective. What was once a strong emotion, perhaps a sense of anger or betrayal, can start to feel less intense as time passes. The person who remains behind might find themselves questioning the validity of those emotions. Perhaps, in the heat of the moment, they saw things one way, but now with some distance, they see things in a different light. What they once thought was a fixed and unchanging feeling may now seem to have been influenced by the situation, by their own internal insecurities, or by misunderstandings. This shift in perception allows emotions to evolve from being rigid and fixed into something more adaptable and less defined by the initial experience. In some cases, walking away can lead to the realization that emotions need to be let go of entirely. When you step back and allow the mind to process without the constant reminder of the situation, it becomes easier to release emotions that no longer serve a positive purpose. Holding on to anger, resentment, or sadness can keep a person stuck in a cycle of negativity. But when there is space, it becomes possible to let those emotions fade away and make room for more constructive feelings like forgiveness, understanding, or acceptance. The act of walking away can be a release in itself, allowing the emotional baggage that once weighed heavily to be shed over time. Furthermore, this shift in emotional perspective can sometimes lead to a reevaluation of the relationship or situation itself. What once seemed like a dire or irreparable issue can be viewed through a more compassionate lens after some time apart. The emotional clarity gained from walking away often leads to a deeper understanding of the root causes of the issues at hand, and in turn, it can help both individuals grow. The emotional landscape that once seemed so chaotic can become more manageable and more grounded in reality. Ultimately, emotions, like everything else, are subject to change. Walking away gives both parties the space to allow their feelings to evolve, to mature, and to transform. What once felt like a permanent emotional state may shift into something new, something more reflective and insightful. The absence doesn't just create space between two people, it creates the possibility for new emotional understandings, deeper connections, and a more balanced approach to future interactions. Walking away, in this sense, becomes not an end, but a pivotal moment of change where emotions have the room to breathe, evolve, and ultimately grow. When you walk away, something profound happens. The very absence you create begins to change everything. This isn't just about physical distance, but also the emotional mental space that comes with it. It's a fascinating paradox that when you step back, when you remove yourself from the situation, the dynamics of the relationship or the circumstance begin to shift. It's as if absence forces the mind to stop, breathe, and reassess things from a different angle. People often don't realize how the presence of someone can sometimes overshadow clarity, clouding one's judgment or emotions. When you walk away, you give the other person the chance to truly reflect, to process their feelings without the constant influence of your presence. This isn't a deliberate tactic, but rather a natural consequence of space. Without you there, they are left with their own thoughts and emotions, no longer influenced by the interactions that might have been taking place while you were around. Initially, they may feel confused or unsettled, not sure of how to handle the sudden void. But with time, they begin to process things. They look back at the moments you shared, the words you spoke, and the actions you took. The absence, in essence, forces them to think differently. They start to see things in a new light because they're no longer reacting to the immediate pull of your presence. Their mind can wander, can ponder what went wrong or what could have been done differently, or they might find themselves appreciating what they took for granted. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or even friendships, the tendency to take someone for granted is common. People become accustomed to their presence and may not always recognize the value they bring. But the moment that person walks away, the balance shifts. It's no longer about the routine of daily exchanges or predictable interactions. The absence compels a shift in awareness and understanding. It might take time, but eventually the person begins to understand just how much you meant to them, how your presence fills spaces they never acknowledged before. Your walking away acts as a mirror, showing them a reflection of themselves, the relationship, and everything that was once taken for granted. It's also important to note that absence allows emotions to come to the surface that were perhaps previously suppressed. When you're constantly around, emotions can be pushed aside or masked by the distractions of day-to-day life. But when you step back, those emotions begin to emerge sometimes in unexpected ways. They might find themselves missing you, feeling a sense of loss, or even questioning their own behavior and actions. The sudden change in dynamic forces them to confront emotions they might not have been ready to face. It's as if the mind begins to fill in the gaps, connecting the dots between past moments and what's happening now. And in that process, their perception of the relationship, the situation, or even you as a person can dramatically change. There's also a more introspective element to this shift in thinking. When you walk away, the other person is faced with the question of why you left, what it means, and what it says about the situation. This kind of internal questioning leads to deep reflection. They might start to rethink their own actions, their own decisions, and the role they played in bringing about this moment. It's in this self-reflection that minds change. The absence is not just an emotional void, but a catalyst for self-awareness, personal growth, and ultimately change. Walking away is not a signal of defeat, but an invitation for clarity. It allows for the possibility that distance might bring about a better understanding, not just of the other person, but of oneself. Ultimately, the mind doesn't stay static. The process of walking away is an important one in creating space for the mind to recalibrate. It's through this absence that minds can reflect, adjust, and often make better decisions. What was once seen as unimportant may now become essential. What once felt like an insurmountable issue may now feel manageable. Walking away doesn't just change the external reality, it changes the internal world too. When you walk away, you create an opportunity for emotional recalibration, both for yourself and for the person you leave behind. Emotions, as we know, are often complex and layered. They can sometimes become muddled in the daily ebb and flow of interactions. In close relationships, feelings can grow intense or be misunderstood, causing reactions that are more impulsive than thoughtful. But when you walk away, you give emotions the time and space they need to breathe, to settle. It's like a reset button for emotional clarity. In the absence of constant engagement, there's room for a more measured, reflective approach to the emotions that may have been overshadowed by the intensity of everyday contact. For the person who remains behind, the walk-away moment can be the trigger for this recalibration. Without the immediate presence of the other person, there's no longer the emotional feedback loop that might have been influencing their behavior or thoughts. The sudden quiet allows them to experience their feelings in a more authentic way. They no longer have to react to the other person's emotional cues or expectations. They are free to focus on their own internal state and consider how they truly feel without the added pressure of real-time interaction. In this space, raw emotions that were perhaps suppressed, whether frustration, regret, longing, or confusion, can surface, and there's finally room to deal with them. It's not always a comfortable experience. In fact, walking away can create an unsettling feeling at first, a sense of imbalance. But in this discomfort, emotional recalibration takes place. The mind starts to detach from its previous emotional impulses and begins to process feelings more consciously. When you're constantly around someone, emotions tend to be reactive. We respond quickly, often driven by our immediate feelings or by the need to protect ourselves from vulnerability. But with the absence of that immediate stimulus, the emotional responses that follow are less reactive and more reflective. The mind becomes capable of thinking about the situation as a whole, rather than just in isolated emotional snapshots. Walking away also helps break the cycle of emotional entanglement that often clouds decision-making. When you're too close to a situation, it's difficult to think clearly or make rational choices. The emotional stakes feel higher, and we often act impulsively, driven by fear or the need to resolve tension quickly. But once you step back, the emotional stakes seem less overwhelming. Time and space allow the mind to process the feelings from a place of calmness. This makes it possible to make decisions that are not influenced by fleeting emotions, but rather by a deeper understanding of the situation as a whole. On a deeper level, emotional recalibration happens because walking away forces a confrontation with the self. In the absence of the other person, the mind is left to explore its own feelings, its own desires, and its own truth. When you're not constantly reacting to someone else's needs or behaviors, you can begin to ask yourself questions that may have been avoided before. What do you really want out of the situation? What is your emotional truth? What have you learned from the experience, and how can you grow from it? These are not questions that come easily when you're caught up in the emotional whirlwind of constant proximity. But when you step back, there's room to ask these essential questions and to find answers that are rooted in clarity rather than in emotional turmoil. For the person left behind, this recalibration can also serve as an opportunity for personal growth. It can lead to an understanding of how their own emotions and actions contributed to the situation. It might lead to a shift in perspective where they come to realize what they truly want from the relationship or what they need to change in themselves to create a healthier dynamic. They begin to see not just the situation, but also their own role in it with a level of emotional maturity they may not have had before. In the end, walking away isn't a signal of abandonment or failure, it's a moment for the emotional equilibrium to reset. Emotions become clearer, more manageable, and more insightful. This space allows for personal growth and deeper understanding, and often leads to decisions that are grounded in clarity rather than impulse. When you walk away, one of the most powerful shifts that occurs is in the perception of the situation, the relationship, and even of you as a person. The presence of another often shapes how we see things, but when that presence is removed, everything changes. Perception, as we all know, is fluid, it's not fixed, but constantly shaped by experiences, emotions, and interactions. When you leave, the person who remains behind is no longer influenced by your actions or words in real time. This newfound absence forces them to look at the situation with fresh eyes. What once seemed like a constant reality can now be viewed from a completely different perspective. It's natural for us to sometimes take others for granted when they're always present, when their actions, their voice, and their presence are a constant part of our world. We can grow accustomed to their patterns, the way they react, the way they make us feel, and the way we interact with them. This regularity can dull our senses to the true nature of the relationship, but when you walk away, it creates a disruption in that routine, and it's this disruption that forces the mind to recalibrate its perception. The absence creates a void, and in this void, new thoughts begin to form, thoughts that may not have been there before. Suddenly, the space is filled with reflections and realizations about what was, what is, and what could be. Perception is also shaped by the emotional lens through which we view the world. When emotions are heightened, especially in difficult or uncertain situations, our ability to objectively assess what's happening can be clouded. It's easy to misinterpret actions, overreact, or create assumptions that may not be entirely accurate. But when you walk away, you take away the emotional charge that has been influencing the perception of the situation. The mind, free from the immediate pressures of emotion, has the chance to process the facts and feelings more rationally. It allows the person left behind to step back and reassess their own emotions, thoughts, and reactions. They begin to see things with a clearer, more balanced perspective that was not possible when both parties were engaged in the intensity of the moment. This shift in perception can also lead to a reevaluation of how they see you as an individual. The absence forces them to reconsider who you are and the role you played in their life. When someone is constantly present, it can be difficult to appreciate them fully because familiarity breeds comfort, and comfort often leads to complacency. But when you walk away, you create the space for them to truly reflect on your value, your unique traits, your contributions, and your presence. They may start to see things they hadn't noticed before, to appreciate qualities they had taken for granted. Your absence creates a void that their mind attempts to fill, and in doing so, they often realize just how significant you were, even in ways they hadn't recognized while you were there. There's also the matter of how perceptions can be colored by the stories we tell ourselves. People often construct narratives in their minds about a relationship or a person. These narratives are shaped by their emotions, past experiences, and personal biases. When you walk away, those narratives can be challenged. The space you leave behind forces them to reconsider the story they've been telling themselves. It may be that they've been interpreting things in a way that isn't entirely accurate, or they may begin to realize that their perceptions were shaped more by their own insecurities or fears than by reality. The absence can act as a catalyst for questioning and rethinking those stories, opening up the possibility for new insights and understanding.